we have followed Abbott Cummings on many routes, actual and intellectual, and have learned from his cumulative research, from his sharp analysis, and from his missionary zeal to find the origins and development of New England and American culture. The great benefit of all of us, he is still talking. He talks and we all listen for the most current scholarship, for real insights, for a long memory of architectural history, preservation, and material culture. For the next 2 or so hours, we will hear from some of the listeners what they and we have learned from Abbott.
The 50th anniversary of Historic New England, which Abbott was so deeply involved in, and there was a conference, Abbott edited it. That book was a transformative book. The thing that Jane has been doing through her lecturing and through her advisory services, and so therefore it was very appropriate in 1994 when that book was reprinted. A second edition, Jane actually wrote the introduction. She was the co-chairman of a conference on upholstery in drapery that was co-sponsored by the Decorative Arts Society, the Museum of Fine Arts Boston, and Sturbridge Village back in 1979.
That was great.
And that was one of those ephemeral moments that we need to bring back again. Lucky we who could be in Sturbridge on that weekend in 1979, because Jane did the most fabulous exhibition, only up for 2 or 3 days, of upholstery and drapery, and the drapery particularly was just because she was able to get her hands, because she knew where the things were, and then cajoled the owners and everybody, because it was Jane, cooperated brilliantly, and there were all these marvelous swags and tassels. And I can remember when it was said how many people would like slides of this installation, and everybody put up their hands. Because really, we need to have a place where these things can be seen permanently. It would be, again, transformative in its way. And of course, Abbott was there early on with his architectural museum, which was also another benefit of the 50th anniversary of SPNEA. Abbott's transformation of the top floor of the Harrison Gray Otis House Annex into a mecca for New England's architecture by way of its unparalleled collection of building fragments could be easily overlooked today because it was sacrificed to offices long ago. The clarity and selectivity of its displays, utilizing significant salvage from long-lost buildings, did so much to further the Society's mission to document the built environment. If only the Architectural Museum could be brought back to life. Then Abbott's legacy as a truly great scholar, teacher, collector, and conservationist. I set this out as a challenge in a way. I want to take Abbott's Architectural Museum and Jane's marvelous exhibition on textiles and Richard's wallpaper and bring it all together. We need a place where this material can be seen. The time is right now, so if this could happen, the world would be a better place.
Thank you, Christopher. I'm out. I remember Peter Thornton from London telling me that in thinking about the upholstery conference, define the visual qualities and texture of fabrics known by historic names but not by contemporary examples. They studied period illustrations, and of course Miss Stone's wonderful 1740s bed valance with its applied tapes was part of the story. Burt insisted on hiring a stenographer to record the proceedings, and it's only from the type's transcript that we know that he interrupted Nina as she was discussing the green wool bed hangings closed on Dr. William Gleason's portrait by Winthrop Chandler. That Nina, in the midst of her discussion, to suggest that the person behind the bed hangings might be dead.
Well, I must say, it's almost impossible to imagine a greater outpouring of accolades. And in a funny sense, I can only really think of that wonderful old English ballad about the lived an old woman, as I heard tell. She went to market all on a fine day and fell asleep on the King's Highway. Along came a beggarman whose name was Stout and cut off her petticoats all round about. Well, it develops. And the punchline is, she goes to sleep and she wakes up in a frigid condition and looks at herself, and the famous remarks that, as I say, immediately spring to mind: lack a mercy, this cannot be I. Well, it's been a long road, really, when you come to think of it. A long road with triumphs as well as failures, some failures. And it's, to me, one of the few joys of aging is to look back on it all and to try to sort it out and to enjoy as much as one can of the many wonderful memories that you've all touched on this afternoon. It means more to me than I can possibly express to have had this event and to hear all these wonderful tributes. There have been some rather interesting events along the way. I recall one similar moment many years ago when I was being feted for some anniversary or for some reason in the society, and one of my saucy young colleagues presented me with a T-shirt which had emblazoned across the front of it, "Preservationists keep it up longer." Fortunately, I hope that there isn't much of a generation gap here today, so I'm not any offense. But there are other ways that I have such warm memories of the life that I lived for those many years. The campaign to save the old corner bookstore in Boston. Now, the old corner bookstore, as we all know, one of the cornerstones of the Boston Preservation Alliance, and is now just one more of our string of beads on the preservation necklace. But it's the campaign to save it had its memorable moments. It, of course, wasn't quite as famous as Paul Revere or the old State House, and yet it had literary associations. And where, but in Boston, could you find a building which would be revered for its literary associations fundamentally? I forget now exactly why it was threatened, but it was obviously, and I believe it was Walter Whitehill who stepped up and said, "We've got to save this building." Put together a committee. I remember there were the likes of Mrs. Jacob Worth, the restaurateur's wife. It was an important committee, and the whole project got underway, and the Globe took it up with a hue and a cry, and published on the front page one of those thermometers that showed the progress of fundraising. And it went up, inched up day by day, and then, if you could believe it, with little more than moments to spare, they went over the top, and the building was saved. So I can't quite remember what was there on the ground floor. It may have been some related bookshop or something. I well remember the upstairs, however, which had all been chopped up into a series of little establishments. I knew this very well because my tailor occupied one of those establishments, and so I was in and out of that building. And this is a wonderful Dickens Smithsonian touch. Right next door to my tailor was a little man who made presidential badges. Although, as far as I can see, I don't think he made anything significantly since McKinley's election. It was this strange sort of mixture of people. Well, all would have been well if Walter hadn't decided that we must have a formal taking of the deed. And that, I can assure you, was mistake number one. His idea of a formal taking of the deed was to have a noonday, open-air, public celebration in front of the building. All the heads of local historical societies and preservation agencies were invited and attended. The Register for Deeds of Suffolk County was there with an embossed parchment document and the usual gold pen. And exactly at noon, with a large crowd assembled, you can always get a crowd on Washington Street over the midday, I can assure you. But it was just that moment that everybody, all the public, worked up into a state of high-alloo. The owner of the building stepped forward, took the gold pen, and the deed to the old corner bookstore was signed, whereupon a second-story sash window flew open, and an old harridan stuck her head out the window. "Say," she said, "are you the owners of this building?" And Walter sort of looked up and said, Yes, we are. He said, "Well," said she, "for Christ's sake, come up here and get us some water. We haven't had any water for 3 days." It was one of preservation's glorious moments. I think it was very early in 1961. Well, all I want to say in conclusion is that we're a mighty lucky bunch, I've always felt, to work under an umbrella of such cultural dimensions and of such important, significant roles in modern society. This is the part of it all that sort of sits in my recollection as one of the great satisfactions. Satisfactions in a very deep sense of accomplishment and contact with important movements in society to stress the never better expressed in dear old Sally Dodge, who was one of our benefactresses. And I well remember an annual meeting of the society in Portsmouth in lovely June day, flowers in full bloom at Langdon House. At one point I looked up and caught the eye of Sally Dodge. She was one of our more ferocious benefactresses, I might add. And her face froze into a frown. She came barreling across the room. She grabbed me by the garden. She grabbed me by the wrist and she said, "Now," she said, "I want you to give me one good reason why all this isn't great fun." I haven't gotten over it yet. Really nothing more to say, where these lofty workaday satisfactions under the guise of public performances, of course, are very important indeed, which leads me to say to all of you who are younger and in or out of harness, and while it may sound very corny, all I can say is carry on.